Your fiancé isn't upstairs getting ready. The waitress leaned in close, her voice barely a breath above the soft clink of crystal and the low hum of live jazz. Her dark hand steadied the wine bottle against the rim of his glass, and she did not pour. She just spoke. She is in room 14. With your brother. Kang Soo-hyun did not move. His hand rested on the white linen tablecloth, fingers spread flat, completely still. The candles on the table burned without flickering. The jazz continued. The 40 guests around him laughed and raised their glasses and kissed each other on the cheek. And Kang Soo-hyun sat at the center of it all like a man who had just heard a sound no one else in the room could hear. He did not look at the waitress. He looked straight ahead. Slowly, without a single word, he reached out and lifted his champagne glass. He brought it to his lips and took one long measured sip. Then he set it back down on the table with the gentleness of a man who understood that the wrong movement right now could cost him everything. Betrayal is rarely announced. It does not arrive with sirens or fire or broken glass. It arrives quietly, in the middle of a beautiful evening, wearing the face of someone who has kissed you goodbye 100 times. It arrives when everything looks perfect, because that is exactly when the people who want to destroy you feel the most safe. The rooftop garden of the Hanul Grand Hotel was breathtaking that night. Strings of warm lights wrapped around sculpted ivory columns. Pale orchids and deep burgundy roses dressed every table in long, elegant arrangements. Seoul glittered 40 stories below, the city alive with light and movement, completely unaware that the most dangerous man in 3 territories was sitting very still in a beautifully tailored charcoal suit, recalculating everything he thought he knew about his life. If you are watching this story for the first time, welcome. Drop your location in the comments right now and tell us where you are watching from. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do it now. You do not want to miss a single moment of what is about to happen. Kang Soo-hyun was 41 years old, and he had not survived this long by being loud. He was the kind of man who spoke once and was obeyed immediately, the kind of man whose stillness made trained soldiers nervous. He had built his empire not through recklessness but through precision, through reading people and rooms and silences the way other men read newspapers. He had looked into the eyes of liars for 20 years and never once been wrong about what he saw. Until tonight, apparently. The rehearsal dinner had been his fiancée Yuna's idea. A celebration before the celebration, she had called it. One final evening with family and partners before the wedding sealed not only their union, but the most significant business alliance of Kang Soo-hyun's career. By this time tomorrow, the merger between his organization and the Park Family Network would be signed, legal, and permanent. 2 of the most powerful criminal families in East Asia, bound together through marriage. It was not just a wedding. It was architecture. Yuna had spent 3 weeks planning this evening. She had chosen the flowers herself, approved every menu item, selected the jazz quartet, and personally called each of the 40 guests to confirm their attendance. She was meticulous and gracious and utterly charming, and everyone in that room adored her, which made the weight of what the waitress had just said feel like a stone dropped into still water. Kang Soo-hyun turned his head very slowly and looked at the woman standing beside his chair. She was not young, maybe late 30s, with a quiet face and careful eyes. She wore the hotel's standard black uniform, her natural hair pinned back neatly. She was already moving away from him, refilling the glass of the guest 2 seats down as though she had said nothing at all, as though she had not just cracked open the foundation of his entire evening with 8 words. He watched her for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He did not call Yuna directly. That would have been clumsy, and Kang Soo-hyun was never clumsy. Instead, he sent a single text message to his head of security, a man named Cho, who was positioned near the elevator bank at the far end of the terrace. The message said only, "Suite 14. Confirm occupants." Now, he slid the phone back into his pocket and picked up his fork. He cut a small piece of the braised short rib on his plate. He lifted it to his mouth and chewed slowly. His expression did not change. The man to his left, a senior advisor from the Park family, was speaking about real estate investments in Busan, and Kang Soo-hyun nodded at the appropriate moments and asked one intelligent question that made the man feel heard and respected. Inside, he was counting. 3 minutes passed. His phone vibrated once against his ribs. He did not reach for it immediately. He let another 30 seconds go by. He laughed quietly at something the Park family advisor said. Then he excused himself with a small, polished smile, stood, and walked toward the edge of the terrace, where the railing overlooked the city and no one could read his face. He looked at the message from Cho. Suite 14 is registered to Mr. and Mrs. Park. Currently occupied. 2 individuals confirmed inside approximately 40 minutes ago. Female late 20s. Male early 30s. Neither matches Mrs. Park's description. Kang Soo-hyun read the message twice. He knew exactly who the male was. His brother Kang Jin-ho was 34 years old, charming in a way that had always come easily to him, the kind of charm that filled rooms and emptied people's guards. Jin-ho had arrived at the rehearsal dinner with a wide smile and a firm handshake and had kissed Yuna on both cheeks and called her his future sister. He had been seated at the far end of the table, laughing too loudly at his own stories, and Kang Soo-hyun had glanced at him once and thought nothing of it. He looked out over the city. The lights of Seoul blurred slightly at the edges. He put his phone away and turned back toward the party. The waitress was at the far corner of the terrace now, collecting empty glasses onto a silver tray. She moved quietly, efficiently, her eyes down. But as Kang Soo-hyun crossed back toward his seat, she glanced up for exactly half a second, and their eyes met. She looked away immediately. He kept walking. He returned to his seat and rejoined the conversation and refilled his own glass with water, not champagne. He needed his mind completely clear. He was already building the frame of what came next, and he needed every piece to be exactly right before he moved a single one. 20 minutes later, Yuna appeared at the top of the terrace stairs. She was luminous. There was no other word for it. She wore a deep wine-red dress that moved like water when she walked, and her hair was swept up in a loose arrangement that made her look effortless and deliberate at the same time. She touched shoulders and smiled at faces as she made her way through the tables, and the room responded to her the way rooms always did, with warmth, with delight. She reached Kang Soo-hyun's chair and placed one hand on his shoulder and leaned down and kissed his cheek. "I'm sorry I was away so long," she said softly near his ear. "I had to take a call from my mother. You know how she is before big events." He turned and looked at her. She met his eyes with a soft, open smile. He said, "Of course. Is she well?" "She is wonderful," Yuna said, settling gracefully into the chair beside him. "She sends her love." He nodded. He picked up his water glass. He thought about Suite 14. He thought about the 40 minutes. He thought about the way Yuna's hand had been completely steady when she touched his shoulder. No tremor. No pause. Not even a flicker of guilt behind her eyes. She was good. He had always known she was intelligent. He had admired it. He had chosen her partly because of it. He had not considered until this moment that the same intelligence he admired could be turned against him with such precision. 24 years of building something from nothing. 17 arrests across 3 countries, none of which held. 6 attempts on his life, none of which succeeded. 2 governments that had tried to dismantle his organization, both of which had eventually looked away. And through all of it, not one person in his inner circle had ever truly deceived him. He wondered how long this had been happening. He wondered how deep it went. And then, because he was Kang Soo-hyun and panic was a luxury he had never been able to afford, he set those thoughts aside and focused on what he needed to do next. He needed to speak to the waitress. He waited another 30 minutes. He gave a short, polished toast to the assembled guests that made the Park family representatives raise their glasses with genuine approval. He accepted congratulations. He was gracious and present and utterly unreadable. Then he leaned toward Yuna and told her he was stepping inside briefly to speak with the event coordinator about the next evening's schedule. She smiled and touched his hand. "Don't be long." "Never," he said. He found the waitress near the service corridor at the back of the terrace, stacking folded napkins onto a cart. He approached without hurrying and stopped 2 feet away from her and said nothing. She felt him there before she saw him. Her hand slowed on the napkins. Then she straightened and turned and looked at him directly for the first time. He studied her face. "You knew I would come find you," he said. It was not a question. She held his gaze. "I considered the possibility." "Then you also considered what happens to people who bring me false information." "I did," she said. She did not look away. "And I came to you anyway." There was something in her eyes that he recognized, not fear exactly, but the particular steadiness of someone who had already passed through the worst version of whatever they were afraid of. Someone who had made peace with a hard decision before acting on it. He said, "Tell me everything." She glanced once toward the terrace. Guests were visible through the glass panels, moving and laughing in the warm light. Then she looked back at him. 3 hours ago, she said quietly, I was restocking the linen supply on the 14th floor. Suite 14's door was not properly latched. I heard voices. I recognized your fiancé's voice because I had served her at this hotel twice before. She paused. I also recognized the name she used. Jin-ho. Kang Soo-hyun did not speak. I did not intend to listen, she continued. But what I heard was not a conversation I could walk away from. He looked at her steadily. What did you hear? She exhaled slowly through her nose. They were not talking about love, she said. They were not making plans to run away or end their arrangement with you quietly. What I heard was a financial conversation. Account numbers. Transfer windows. A timeline tied directly to your wedding date. The terrace lights reflected in the glass panel beside them. Your fiancé said that once the marriage certificate is signed, the business merger triggers an automatic consolidation clause. She said that clause gives the primary family unit joint access to the operating accounts of both organizations within 72 hours. The waitress's voice remained level, controlled. She said that your brother has already made contact with 3 of your senior lieutenants. She said 2 of them are willing to shift allegiance once the transfer is complete. Kang Soo-hyun was very still. She used a specific phrase, the waitress added. She said, by the time he understands what happened, it will already be finished. The jazz from the terrace drifted through the glass. A waiter pushed a cart past the far end of the corridor without looking their way. Kang Soo-hyun looked at the woman in front of him for a long moment. She was not trembling. She was not performing. She was simply standing there, having said a difficult thing, waiting for whatever came next. What is your name? He asked. Adiz, she said. How long have you worked here, Adiz? 11 months. And before that? A pause. Brief but present. Other work, she said carefully. The kind that teaches you to listen closely. He did not press further. Not yet, he said. Go back to the terrace. Continue your work. Do not leave this floor without my knowledge. She held his gaze for one more second. Then she gave a small nod and picked up her tray and walked back toward the party without looking back. Kang Soo-hyun stood alone in the service corridor for exactly 4 seconds. Then he straightened his jacket, turned, and walked back into the warm light of the rehearsal dinner. Jin-ho had returned to his seat at the far end of the table. He was laughing again, leaning back in his chair with the relaxed ease of a man who believed himself completely safe. He caught his brother's eye across the table and raised his glass with a wide grin. Kang Soo-hyun looked at him. He smiled back. And in that moment he made his decision. He was not going to confront anyone. He was not going to make a scene. He was not going to give either of them the slightest indication that anything in his world had shifted. He was going to finish this dinner. He was going to smile and toast and embrace the people around him. And while he did all of that, he was going to dismantle everything his brother and his fiancée had spent months building. Quietly. Completely. Without a single warning. The most expensive lessons are always the ones that arrive wearing the face of loyalty. And the most dangerous response to betrayal is not the one that comes with shouting. It is the one that comes with a smile and enough patience to wait for exactly the right moment. Kang Soo-hyun walked back to his chair, sat down beside the woman who had planned to ruin him, and asked her if she wanted dessert. She said yes with a beautiful smile. He ordered for her. And the trap, silent and invisible, began to close. Kang Soo-hyun did not rush. That was the thing about him that his enemies had always underestimated. They expected rage. They prepared for confrontation. They braced themselves for the version of him that arrived with force and noise. What they never prepared for was the version that sat across from them at a candlelit table, cutting his dessert into precise portions and asking thoughtful questions about their families. He was that version tonight. He laughed at Jin-ho's stories. He refilled Yuna's water glass when it ran low. He thanked the Park family representatives for making the journey from Busan, and told them the wedding tomorrow would be an evening none of them would forget. Every word was smooth. Every gesture was warm. And underneath all of it, his mind was moving like a current beneath a frozen river. Fast, purposeful, invisible. He sent 3 messages during dessert. The first went to Cho, his head of security. It contained 4 names and a single instruction. Pull their financial records going back 18 months and have the results on his desk within 2 hours. The second went to his personal attorney, a woman named Park Ji-won who had handled the legal architecture of his organization for 11 years. The message asked her one question about the consolidation clause in the merger agreement, specifically whether it could be suspended unilaterally before execution if new information about a signatory emerged. Her reply came in 4 minutes. Yes, with documentation. The third message went to a private number he had not used in over a year. It contained no words, only a location and a time. By the time the jazz quartet played their final number and the guests began gathering their coats and exchanging embraces, Kang Soo-hyun had already rebuilt the entire structure of the evening inside his head. He knew what he was going to do. He knew the order in which he was going to do it. And he knew exactly which piece he needed most to make it work. He found Adiz near the service exit, returning a stack of folded linens to a trolley. He approached from her left, unhurried, and stopped beside her without looking directly at her. "The kitchen on this floor," he said quietly. "Staff break room. 10 minutes. She gave no visible reaction. She simply continued folding. He walked away. The break room was small and windowless, smelling of coffee and industrial cleaning solution. A single overhead light hummed above a narrow table with 4 chairs. Kang Soo-hyun was already seated when Adiz came in and closed the door behind her. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Tell me who you are. The full version." She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. She placed her hands flat on the table and looked at him directly. "I worked for 12 years in financial intelligence," she said. "Not in Nigeria, not here. In a department that does not have a public name. My work was tracking the movement of money through criminal networks, following it through shell companies and ghost accounts and offshore structures until I could show exactly who owned what and where it was going." Kang Soo-hyun said nothing. 3 years ago," she continued, "I was assigned to a case that led me to people I was not supposed to find. People connected to my own organization. When I reported what I had discovered, I was given 2 options. Disappear quietly or be disappeared without the quiet. She paused. I chose the first option. I have been choosing it every day since. He studied her face. And the conversation you overheard in Suite 14, he said. The account numbers. The transfer window. The timeline. You understood all of it. Every word, she said. Could you document it? Reconstruct it accurately enough to be used as evidence against a formal legal challenge to the merger. She looked at him steadily. Yes, if I had access to the right tools. He reached into his jacket and placed a slim encrypted tablet on the table between them. You have access now. She looked at the tablet. Then she looked at him. What exactly are you asking me to do? I am asking you, he said quietly, to help me take apart what they built before tomorrow morning. The merger clause. The account access. The lieutenants they turned. He folded his hands on the table. I am asking you to use everything you know to make sure that by the time my brother wakes up tomorrow, there is nothing left for him to take. The overhead light hummed. Adiz looked at the tablet on the table between them. And after, she said. After, he said, we will discuss what you need. New documents. A new position. Something that is not a hotel uniform and a trolley of folded linens. She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and picked up the tablet. They worked for the next 90 minutes in that small room. Adiz reconstructed the conversation from Suite 14 from memory with a precision that made Kang Soo-hyun understand, fully and finally, exactly who she was. She did not approximate. She did not guess. She recalled specific phrasing, specific numbers, the exact sequence of the exchange, and she built from it a detailed written account that his attorney could use to formally flag the merger for emergency legal review. Meanwhile, Kang Soo-hyun made calls. Quiet calls, short calls, the kind that moved things without making noise. By midnight, the consolidation clause had been suspended pending a legal audit triggered by a conflict of interest disclosure. By 12:30, 2 of the 3 lieutenants Yuna had reportedly approached had been contacted privately and given a simple choice presented in the calm, unhurried tone that Kang Soo-hyun reserved for moments when he wanted people to understand exactly how serious he was. By 1 in the morning, the primary offshore account that Jin-ho had established 4 months ago, the one Adiz had identified from the account number she had memorized in that unlocked suite, had been flagged and frozen through a network of financial contacts that had taken Kang Soo-hyun 15 years to build. He did all of this without raising his voice once. At 1:15 he stood, rolled down his sleeves, and buttoned his cuff links. There is one more thing, he said. Adiz looked up from the tablet. Tomorrow morning, he said, I am going to sit down with my brother and my fiancé. Together. I want them to believe until the very last moment that nothing has changed. That the wedding is still happening. That the merger is still on track. He paused. I need you in that room. She looked at him carefully. As what? As my new international accounts advisor, he said. Brought in overnight following a routine pre-wedding financial review. It is not unusual. It will not raise suspicion. He held her gaze. But when I give you a signal, I need you to present what you have documented tonight. Calmly. Completely. In front of both of them. Adiz was quiet for a moment. You want them to see it fall apart in real time, she said. I want them to understand, he said, that there is no version of this where they walk away with anything. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once. He left the break room first. She followed 3 minutes later, and the corridor was empty, and the party was long over, and the rooftop garden above them was dark and quiet now. All the flowers and candles and warm light packed away until tomorrow's ceremony. The morning arrived gray and cool. The hotel's private dining room on the 38th floor had been reserved for the wedding party's breakfast. Round tables in white linen. Silver pots of coffee. Baskets of bread. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over a soul that was still waking up. the city soft and unhurried in the early light. Jin-ho arrived first. He was freshly dressed, relaxed, wearing a pale gray shirt open at the collar. He poured himself coffee and stood at the window with the ease of a man who believed the day belonged to him. Yuna arrived 7 minutes later, elegant even at this hour, in a cream blouse and tailored trousers, her hair loose around her shoulders. She kissed Kang Soo-hyun on the cheek when she entered and told him he looked tired and asked if he had slept. "A few hours," he said. "Enough." She smiled and reached for the coffee pot. It was then that Adiz entered the room. She wore a deep charcoal blazer over a black blouse, her hair down, the hotel uniform entirely gone. She carried a slim leather folder and walked with the quiet authority of someone who moved through boardrooms, not service corridors. Kang Soo-hyun stood and introduced her smoothly. "This is Adiz. She joined us last night to complete a routine pre-execution review of the merger documentation. Standard procedure before anything is signed." He gestured toward the table. "She will sit with us this morning." Jin-ho looked at her with mild curiosity and said good morning. Yuna's eyes moved to Adiz and stayed there for exactly 1 second longer than they should have. Then she smiled and said, "Of course. Welcome." They sat. Coffee was poured. Bread was passed. Kang Soo-hyun asked Jin-ho about the drive from his hotel and listened to the answer with apparent interest. He asked Yuna whether her dress had arrived from the alterations and she said yes and described a small adjustment at the waist that had taken the seamstress 40 minutes, and he nodded as though this were the most natural conversation in the world. All the while, Adiz sat to his right with the leather folder in front of her, and she was perfectly still, and she did not look at Yuna, and she did not look at Jin-ho, and she waited. Kang Soo-hyun set down his coffee cup. "Before we move into the day," he said pleasantly, "I want to take a few minutes to go over some of the final documentation. I know it is early and today is a celebration, but I would rather have full clarity before we sign anything this evening." He looked around the table with an easy smile. "Adiz, would you mind walking us through what you found?" Adiz opened the leather folder. She did not clear her throat. She did not apologize for the interruption to the pleasant morning. She simply began speaking in the clear, measured voice of someone who had spent 12 years presenting findings to people who did not want to hear them. "During last night's review," she said, "several items required clarification. The first is the consolidation clause in the merger agreement, specifically Section 7C, which grants joint account access to the primary family unit within 72 hours of the marriage execution." She laid a document on the table. That clause was drafted 8 months ago at the request of the fiancé's legal team. It is not standard language in agreements of this type. Jin-ho reached for another piece of bread. Yuna's hand was around her coffee cup. She did not move. "The second item," Adiz continued, "is an offshore account established approximately 4 months ago in a jurisdiction that falls outside the standard reporting requirements tied to this merger. The account was opened under a holding company registered to a director whose name does not appear anywhere in the formal merger documentation." She turned a page. "The account received 3 deposits totaling a significant amount in the months following the engagement announcement. The source of those deposits traces back, through 2 layers of shell structure, to the Park family network." The room was very quiet now. Jin-ho had stopped reaching for the bread. Adiz looked up from the folder and addressed the table directly. "The account was established in the name of Kang Jin-ho." The words landed in the room like a stone into still water. Jin-ho's jaw tightened. He looked at his brother. "This is absurd," he said. His voice was controlled but thin at the edges. "Whatever this woman has put together, it is completely fabricated. Soo-hyun, you cannot be serious." Kang Soo-hyun looked at his brother. He did not look angry. He did not look wounded. He looked the way he always looked, calm, clear, entirely present. like a man who had already finished a conversation that everyone else in the room thought was just beginning. "The account number," he said quietly, "is K7741 Offshore Cayman. The holding company is registered as Myri Pacific Consulting Limited. The most recent deposit was made 11 days ago." He paused. "Would you like to tell me I have the wrong information?" Jin-ho said nothing. Yuna set down her coffee cup. Something shifted in her face. It was subtle, the way the light shifts in a room when a cloud passes over the sun. The warmth did not disappear all at once. It simply became something else underneath, something cooler and more angular, and entirely different from the woman who had kissed his cheek 20 minutes ago. "Soo-hyun," she said. Her voice was gentle, careful. "Whatever you think you have found, I want you to know that this can all be explained. There are financial structures in place that your team may not have the full context for. If you would just let me make one call to my family's legal office, I can clear all of this up before it becomes something it does not need to be." He looked at her for a long moment. "You told my brother," he said, "that by the time I understood what had happened, it would already be finished." The color did not drain from Yuna's face. She was too composed for that. But something behind her eyes went very still. "I heard you," he said simply. "Last night, in Suite 14. Jin-ho pushed back from the table. "This is insane. You had someone listening to a private conversation? You are sitting here accusing your own family based on the word of a hotel employee." He gestured toward Adiz with open contempt. "Who is this woman? Where did she come from? You brought a stranger into a family matter, and you are treating her word as evidence." "I am treating her word," Kang Soo-hyun said quietly, "alongside account records, legal documentation, and a recorded financial trail that goes back 4 months as evidence." "Yes." Jin-ho stood up fully now. He straightened his jacket. He looked at his brother with an expression that moved through several things very quickly: calculation, then something that might have been genuine hurt, then something harder and colder that replaced both. "You have always done this," Jin-ho said. "You have always made me feel like I was standing just outside the door of something I had earned the right to be part of. Your whole life, everything you built, and I was always just the brother. Never a partner. Never an equal. Just someone you tolerated at the edge of your table." Kang Soo-hyun listened to this. He let his brother finish. Then he said, "You were never outside the door, Jin-ho. I handed you the key 11 years ago when I gave you a seat at the table that other men would have died for. What you chose to do with it is not something I am responsible for." Jin-ho had nothing to say to that. Yuna tried once more. She reached across the table and placed her hand over Kang Soo-hyun's. Her touch was warm. Her eyes were soft. And she was extraordinary at this. He recognized that fully and without bitterness. She was genuinely extraordinary. "We can fix this," she said quietly. "Whatever has broken, we can repair it. The wedding does not have to end. The merger does not have to fall. We just need to talk privately without all of this." She glanced at Adiz and the folder. "Whatever mistakes were made, we can correct them together. That is what marriage is." He looked at her hand on his. He looked at her face. And he said with complete gentleness, "The merger has already been suspended. The accounts have been frozen. The 3 lieutenants you approached have been spoken to." He turned his hand over beneath hers, not to hold it, but to remove it carefully, the way you remove something fragile from a surface where it does not belong. "There is nothing left to negotiate, Yuna. It is already finished." Her hand returned to her side. The table was silent. Outside the windows, Seoul was fully awake now. The city bright and moving in the morning light, entirely indifferent to what was happening on the 38th floor of the Hanul Grand Hotel. Kang Soo-hyun stood. He straightened his jacket. He looked at his brother, and then at the woman who had planned to wear white tomorrow and stand beside him and smile while his empire was being quietly transferred into other hands. He said, I will ask you both to leave this hotel within the hour. Everything else will be handled through legal channels. I do not need to see either of you again. Jinho left without another word, his chair scraping back hard against the floor, his footsteps fast and sharp down the corridor. Yuna stood more slowly. She gathered her things with the careful composure of a woman who refused to be seen falling apart. At the door, she stopped and turned and looked at Kang Soo-hyun one final time. She did not look at Adiz. She said nothing. Then she walked out and the door closed behind her, and the room was very quiet. Adiz closed the leather folder and set it neatly on the table. Kang Soo-hyun stood at the window for a moment, looking out at the city. The light was clean and flat and honest, the way morning light always is before the day gets complicated. He turned. You presented that well, he said. You built the case, she said. I only delivered it. He looked at her for a moment. I meant what I said last night, he said. About what comes after. She held his gaze. There was no eagerness in her face. No relief. Just that same steadiness he had recognized from the beginning, the particular quality of someone who has survived enough to stop being surprised by what survival asks of them. I know, she said. He nodded once. Then stay, he said. Outside, Seoul moved through its morning without ceremony. Somewhere below, a wedding that was never really a wedding was being quietly dismantled, and two people who had built a careful and elaborate trap were walking away from the wreckage of it with nothing. And in a 38th floor dining room that smelled of coffee and fresh bread and the faint ghost of cut flowers, the most dangerous person in that building was not the man who had just ended a betrayal with 3 words and a frozen account. It was the woman everyone had walked past for 11 months without once looking up from their own reflection. The most powerful move on any board is not the one that announces itself. It is the one that has already been completed before anyone realizes the game has changed. And the most dangerous person in any room is never the one holding the most. It is the one who sees everything, says nothing, and waits for exactly the right moment to speak. If this story kept you glued from beginning to end, hit that like button right now and share it with someone who loves a story where the truth wins. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss what comes next. And drop a comment below. Did Kang Soo-hyun handle this the right way? Or should he have given them a chance to explain? We want to hear from you.